Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Rescuers are still digging through the rubble in both Syria and Turkey as a devastating quake has left more than 6,200 dead. Alert has issued a warning of sextortion involving young children in Canada, many of them boys between the ages of 10 to 17. And political reporter Brian Lilly discusses how successful premiers may be in asking Ottawa for more healthcare funding as they meet with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Rescuers in both Syria and Turkey continue to dig through the remains of thousands of buildings flattened by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, desperately trying to find survivors. The death toll has now exceeded 6,200. The number of people affected by Monday's quake could be as high as 23 million. Turkish President Erdogan has announced a 3-month state of emergency in the earthquake-ravaged area. The Canadian government announced its first assistance for the rescue efforts. Sadly, an aid worker with Doctors Without Borders was killed during rescue operations in Syria. Syria Red Crescent is asking the United Nations to help coordinate aid to rebel-held areas as well. Survivors of the devastating quake in a small Turkish town are fearing the worst for their loved ones who are still missing.
Bacımın çocukları var. 4 tane. Bir tane görümcesi var, bir tane kayını var, iki tane de görümcesinin çocukları var. Hepsi bitti. Hepsi bitti. Hepsi bitti. Dün gelselerdi bunlar. Kurtulurdu, gelmediler.
Closer to home, there's a global sextortion crisis taking place here in our country. That's according to officials with Alert. Law enforcement agencies have seen a large increase in the number of sextortion cases where children are being coerced into sending explicit images online and then extorted for money. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection says it receives 200 sextortion cases on average per month. This means 87% of sextortion incidents reported are affecting boys between the ages of 10 to 17. Detective Steve Brighton with the Internet Child Exploitation Unit talked about the rising number of sextortion cases that are being seen through Project Compass.
We've investigated approximately 150 case files, and that includes ones that are reported directly to us from municipal police agencies, from the RCMP, and then we get a large number from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the U.S., and that comes through the RCMP in Ottawa when they're assigned to us. We are working with numerous law enforcement agencies worldwide, the RCMP, the Australian Federal Police, the United Kingdom, Department of Homeland Security, as well as the FBI, because it's really a global problem right now. There's thousands and thousands of reported cases to date.
If you have information about a child who's potentially being exploited, you can contact Lethbridge Police or submit a concern anonymously at cybertip.ca. Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit has charged the mother of a toddler in Strathcona County with suspected child exploitation. Police in Alberta received the tip from the FBI that the child was allegedly being sexually abused. The child has been taken to a hospital in Edmonton. The victim's 35-year-old mother faces various charges, including sexual exploitation, sexual interference, along with making and distributing child pornography. The suspect was released from custody and is scheduled to be in court February 22nd in Sherwood Park. The victim's father says he was unaware of the alleged offences and has been cooperating with police. The Canadian Labour Congress is calling for improvements in Canada's healthcare system. The group's president, Bea Brusk, is urging the federal government to increase funding for both pharmacare, mental health services, and bring long-term care into Canada's public healthcare system.
We are absolutely at a crossroads in this country. Our healthcare system is in crisis. And it's up to our governments to act to make sure that people can access the care they need when they need it. For years, healthcare workers have been sounding the alarm. Instead of action from governments, we saw chronic underfunding. That has resulted in hospitals, long-term care homes, and other facilities facing critical staffing shortages. We have overflowing emergency rooms, children's hospitals that are swamped, and wait times for critical surgeries just keep on getting longer.
Alberta Premier Daniel Smith met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just ahead of the PM's meetings with the premiers who are looking for an increase in federal healthcare funding from 22% to 35%. Premier Smith says Not only does she want to speak with Trudeau about an increase in healthcare spending, but also wants to chat with Trudeau about the government's Just Transition Plan.
Impression that the energy sector is going to be phased out. It's not going to be phased out. We're transforming away from high-intensity emissions to lower emissions. I think we have some shared priorities on that, on LNG export to reduce emissions using the green transfer mechanism to get credit here. That would also help British Columbia, working on critical minerals, hydrogen, geothermal, lithium. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to find some common ground.
Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson spoke with reporters ahead of her meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss an increase in healthcare spending. Stefanson says today's meeting is really about listening and learning what PM Justin Trudeau's proposal is.
I think what this will offer is hopefully an injection into the healthcare system moving forward to make sure that it's more sustainable for the future. So to those individuals that are out there seeking healthcare right now, we want to ensure, certainly from Manitoba's perspective, we'll continue to put together programming to ensure we do have our surgical and diagnostic backlog task force as well that's tackling some of those things. Obviously, some of the challenges out there are human resource challenges in the system as well. So those are things that will come, I think, from a more sustainable funding model into the future. And we look forward to having those discussions today as premiers and with the Prime Minister.
Now, Bridge City News has since learned that the plan laid out by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is a $196 billion 10-year healthcare offer to the premiers, which they're now mulling over. Political reporter Brian Lilly says each province has different needs when it comes to health care. He says that will really play into how each premier is approaching their meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
If you've got 20% or almost 20% of your population under the age of 18, which is the case in Alberta, but you've got less than 15% of that in Newfoundland, and you've got a huge seniors population, well then what you're looking for is going to be different. So that's how a lot of it plays out. And it's why there's not a one size fits all. Having bureaucrats in Tunney's pasture in Ottawa dictate health policy in each province wouldn't work, because you'd be looking at it from what you know locally. And guess what? Ottawa is different than other parts of the country when it comes to age, demographics, health outcomes.
Mr. Lilly will also explain how the $6.8 million tax dollars spent on 10 people at a Calgary quarantine hotel during the pandemic was just the tip of the COVID-19 iceberg. He'll explain coming up after Business News. Sometimes I really have to do a double take on the calendar. It's the first week of February and well above zero, which is fantastic for this time of year in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the Chinook winds may be staying with us for quite some time.
Well, it does look that way when you look at the long-range forecast, but Hal, I got to warn you, we could see some white stuff tomorrow because Wednesday's forecast is showing a 60% chance of flurries or showers, and with a high of 3 degrees tomorrow, most likely it will melt as soon as it hits the ground, and it won't be enough to accumulate to a white ground, just a wet ground most likely. Overnight, we are looking at wind gusts of 40 to 60 kilometers per hour, both tonight and into Wednesday, and an overnight low of 1 degree. Not bad at all. Hal, I will be back later in the show to give you that 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The province announced a new agri-processing tax credit officials say will attract more investment, create jobs, and help to diversify the Alberta economy. Agriculture Minister Nate Horner says the province will provide a non-refundable tax credit to support growth and attract investment.
The new Alberta Agri-Processing Investment Tax Credit will launch this spring and will provide a 12% non-refundable tax credit to eligible businesses. Those businesses will have to make a minimum capital investment of $10 million in value-added agri-processing in the province. The program will build on our competitive advantages and create a business environment that attracts even more industry to ensure Alberta's agri-processing sector reaches its full potential.
The University of Lethbridge is pulling out the welcome mat to their soon-to-be new president and vice chancellor. Dr. Digvir JS was announced as the new president back on January the 19th, and today he visited the campus for the very first time. Dr. JS, who has an agriculture research background, says he's looking forward to being a part of an institution that contributes a lot to the agriculture sector.
When I saw the number of agriculture-related companies in the town, And I certainly would like to explore the partnership with them, whether it is through engineering program we want to develop an agriculture and food related area or sustainable agriculture area, and engage those companies in building that program. And also I would say engaging them to know how we can work also with college, Lethbridge College together, to develop a unique training program for meet the industry needs if we don't have a degree program.
A member of the Board of Governors for the university says Dr. JS brings a lot to the table, and they look forward to working alongside him.
Dr. JS has a number of important attributes. I mean, first of all, the research that he's done in the past directly ties to Southern Alberta. I mean, his area of research was in agriculture. He's an agricultural engineer, so there's a great fit there. But more importantly, he is a tremendous individual. He is Order of Canada. I mean, that's not something that comes easily. It's a real testament to his character. He's had tremendous administrative experience as the Vice President of Research and Internationalization at the University of Manitoba. And he's a good fellow. He listens to you, he wants to collaborate, and he wants you to be successful.
The new U of L president, Dr. JS, will officially begin his role on July the 1st. Lethbridge City Council gave second and third reading on Tuesday for a potential increase to parking fines in our city's downtown core. If the fines are raised, the price for not paying for parking will increase from $25 to $50. Now, if you pay within a week, you'll receive $15 off the fine. Sarah Amies, the executive director of the Downtown BRZ, says the reaction of a potential parking fine increase from the hundreds of business owners in downtown Lethbridge has been of dismay and frustration.
By increasing these fines from $25 to $50 is really going to dissuade folks from coming downtown. If there's a choice of shopping or services either in the downtown or elsewhere in the city where free parking is offered, people are going to go to those areas where there is free parking. And this just seems to be yet another obstacle that the downtown businesses and services are going to have to surmount.
Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to defer the motion to an economic SPC meeting on February the 15th. The game of street hockey has been a Canadian tradition for generations, and the City of Lethbridge is looking at spreading the growth of the sport here in our city. Lethbridge City Council was voting for a funding request of $200,000 for the city to be able to host Play on Canada street hockey events from 2023 to 2026. That translates to around $50,000 for each year for the initiative. We'll have more details for you on Wednesday's 5 p.m. newscast. Medicine smokers may have to butt out soon in public spaces if a bylaw is passed, adding the Gas City to the latest list of Alberta municipalities that have banned smoking. The Hat City Council passed a first reading Monday of a proposed bylaw that would ban smoking and vaping at public events or public spaces including parks, pools, and playgrounds. Monday's initial reading did not include debate. Councillors will be able to question the proposal during the second reading. BC's NDP government says it plans to spend this year's projected surplus of around $6 billion despite a projected economic slowdown. Government officials say people need help now, and cuts to programs and services are not on the horizon.
All the analysts, any economist that you speak to knows that there's some challenging days ahead. We have been facing real global pressures with the rising interest rates. All economists are predicting a slowdown in the economy, and I think it's prudent on us to make sure that we have the investments that are needed to support people now in our budgets. And certainly we believe that now's not the time to be cutting services to people. Now's not the time to be scaling back the important things that British Columbians need. And so that's what you'll see from us, both addressing the economic challenges that are coming, but also making sure the supports people need are there for them.
The federal government says we may be headed to a recession this year. Now, many Canadians are already finding it very tough with 6% inflation. The cost of food and rent continues to climb. It appears as though more churches are helping Canadians through some of these very difficult times. That's according to Pastor Doug Shimoda with City Light Church here in Lethbridge. Pastor Doug says the church can help in a wide variety of ways.
As a church, we try to help people. Of course, we do that through our preaching. We have offering giving times, and we encourage people to follow the pathways of God's principles and giving and receiving. Giving doesn't make you have less; it actually allows God to give you more. So it's a principle of reaping and sowing. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. So we try to help. And I think more and more churches are trying to help people with their financial debt and wealth creation.
Pastor Doug will also explain how the church is helping those who grieve the loss of a loved one. We shall have that interview coming up for you in the second half of our newscast. Well, we've been enjoying some pretty nice mild temperatures thanks to the Chinook winds here in Lethbridge. The above seasonal values will be sticking around for quite some time. Full weather details are on deck. You know, the average temperature for Lethbridge this time of year is at the freezing mark, 0. It's nice that we've been well above that for quite some time now. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though the Chinook will be remaining with us for most of the week.
Yeah, well, we will see those Chinook winds gusting again this evening at 60 kilometers per hour. And then again, gusting from 40 to 60 and then down to 20 to 40 by the afternoon. High of 3 degrees. Also, there's that 60% chance of flurries mixed with rain on Wednesday. So we'll see whether we have rain or snow. Either way, it should melt by the time it hits the ground with those temperatures. Up to 7 degrees on Thursday with mainly sunny skies, those clear skies remaining. As we get into the weekend there, 9 degrees the high on Friday and a high of 6 degrees expected Saturday. Look at that right there. First Sunday. I'm excited about this one. 10 degrees. We could be seeing those double digits already. Here we are in February, not even Valentine's Day yet. Pretty exciting. 7 degrees the high on Monday with a mix of sun and cloud. Now, the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is 0, and we're shooting way above that this week. Minus 12 is the average low. 18 was our high temperature on this day back in 1954. And in 1994, we had the chilliest day on record for this day, which was minus 34. Okay, so we're looking at a sunrise this morning at 7:55 and our sunset this evening at 5:30, 6 p.m. and it gave us 9 hours and 41 minutes of a daylight. Look at that. We're getting close to that 10-hour mark already. Victoria, seeing some winds in the Harrow Strait up to 50K. Otherwise, partly cloudy skies, 8 degrees the high tomorrow, 6 degrees the high tomorrow in Vancouver after an overnight thunderstorm. Looking at mainly partly cloudy skies, mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. 2 degrees the high in Edmonton tomorrow with an overnight snowfall of 2 centimeters. That snow should be finishing up in the morning. And then in Calgary, also looking at a high of 2 degrees, 60% chance of flurries and winds at 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. For the rest of the prairies, we are seeing a risk of freezing rain mixed with 2 centimeters of snow in Saskatoon, -2 the high there, -1 the high in Regina tomorrow, 60% chance of flurries with a risk of freezing rain and a high of 0 expected tomorrow in Winnipeg. Winnipeg seeing a 30% chance of flurries and also mixed with some freezing rain. Okay, as we get to the central part of the country, Toronto looking at a 40% or 30% rather chance of flurries there, 3 degrees the high. Ottawa seeing a 40% chance of flurries there, 0 the high. Montreal coming in at 3 degrees, should remain steady at 3 tomorrow throughout the day, and mainly cloudy skies. Could see that sun peek out a little bit later on in the day. As we get into the Maritimes, we're seeing a mix of freezing drizzle with some flurries in Fredericton, high of 2 degrees, high of 3 in Halifax. Halifax seeing a 60% chance of flurries mixed with a 60% chance of rain, and a high of 0 in Charlottetown. Could see that mix of freezing drizzle there as well, and high of 0 in St. John's, Newfoundland. Newfoundland looking at more snow there, 5 to 10 centimeters actually. So looking at heavy snow conditions and blowing snow in exposed areas. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland hosted an in-person meeting with her provincial and territorial counterparts to discuss our current economic environment, the transition to a clean economy, and investing in healthcare.
Now is a time when there are 2 big areas that are calling out for federal investment. One is healthcare. I think it is clear to all Canadians that we need to invest in our healthcare system, and we made commitments during the election campaign to do so, and we will honor those commitments. The other area that is really calling out for investment is building the clean economy of the 21st century. We've started that work. We said in the fall economic statement we would be investing even more in the budget, and we will do so because we must. The alternative is really for Canada to be left out.
The meeting came at a time with inflation hovering around 6% and interest rates being much higher than a year ago. Stats Canada says the country's merchandise trade deficit narrowed to $160 million in December from a revised $219 million in November. But for the whole of last year, it says Canada posted a merchandise trade surplus of $20.1 billion. That compares with a surplus in 2021 of only $4.6 billion. The federal agency says exports in December fell 1.2% from the previous month. That was led by a 7.6% drop in energy exports and a 9.9% decline in farm and fishing exports. Stats Canada also says imports dropped 1.3%, largely due to a 6.4% decline in imports of consumer goods, while motor vehicles and parts dropped 6%. Cineplex says it returned to a profit in its latest quarter as box office revenue per patron and concession revenue per patron both hit record highs. The movie theater company says it had a net profit of $10.2 million in the fourth quarter. That compares with a loss of $21.8 million from a year earlier. It says revenue increased more than 15% to just over $350 million. The company says theater attendance, however, dropped from 10.2 to 9.2 million last year, but box office revenue per patron increased 6% to just over $13, while concession revenue per patron rose 19% to just under $9. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 96 points on the day to finish at 20,725. The Dow was up 265 points to 34,156. The S&P 500 was up 25 on the day to 4111, and the Nasdaq was up 226 to 12,113. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 303 to 77.14 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 13 cents to 258 US. Gold was even on the day at 1873.11 US an ounce, and silver was also even at 22.17 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.86 per bushel, barley's at $9.12, canola's at $18.93, and corn is at $11.17 per bushel. Live cattle were down 25 cents to $160.58. Feeder cattle March contract was down 50 cents to $187.20, and lean hogs were up 33 cents to $75.38. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.64 US. Recapping one of our top stories, rescuers in both Syria and Turkey continue to dig through the rubble of thousands of buildings flattened by a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, desperately trying to find survivors. The death toll has now exceeded 6,200. The number of people affected by Monday's quake could be as high as 23 million. Even though the Trudeau government said it was open to bail reform, the motion brought forward by the Conservatives was shot down in the House. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have details for us shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Help support a worthy cause. The second annual Badges vs. Bolts Charity Classic Hockey Challenge is taking place Saturday, February 11th at the Nicholas Sharon Arena with a puck dropping at 7:30 p.m. Cheer on our local first responders and Lethbridge Lightning semi-pro hockey team as they battle it out. A live auction will be held during the first period intermission, and a live player auction will take place during the second and third periods. Tickets are $25 each. Kids 12 and under are free. Purchase yours at Lethbridge Tactical Supply or call 403-647-4103. A percentage of the ticket sales will be donated to the Jack Addy Cancer Center. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Food Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There's been a lot of discussion amongst premiers in Canada that more money is needed to fix the healthcare issues many provinces are facing. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, the premiers are meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Will a deal get done?
Well, a deal will be offered. Will it be signed off on by the time they all leave Ottawa tonight? And look, as far as I know, most, if not all of them, are leaving the nation's capital tonight. It's not going to be a multi-day, drawn-out affair. So there's going to be an offer. Much of the speculation is a little over $100 million over 10 years. We'll see if that gets sweetened a bit. It's definitely not what the premiers wanted. They wanted, and they've been calling for years, an immediate increase to 35% of healthcare spending in this country being covered by the federal government instead of the current 22%. That's not going to happen. That would be the equivalent of about $28 billion a year and growing. So they will get something, and they're also going to get, assistance in terms of looking for ways to innovate. And innovation often means delivering healthcare differently, because whether we're talking about in Alberta or British Columbia, in Ontario or Quebec, we're waiting too long for services quite often. Now, in your province, in Alberta, they've started to experiment with community clinics for surgery, often private clinics, to deliver, but paid for by the government. That's almost 20% of your surgical output now, I'm told, in Alberta. Other provinces are going that way. The federal government is going to be fine with that. Justin Trudeau's not going to interfere and say, tut, 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 you can't do that. In exchange for the money, though, there's going to be a requirement for reporting. Okay, so we decided we're going to really focus on wait times for these surgeries. Have you accomplished your wait times? If they were at 20 weeks, have you brought them down to 10? Things like that. That's the type of data sharing that they're looking for, is, numbers writ large. Have you brought down your waiting list? It's funny how it sounds an awful lot like what I was covering in 2004 when Paul Martin did his deal.
Brian, each province obviously has different needs. You can't, brush everyone with the same stroke here. How does that really play into how each premier is approaching their meeting with the Prime Minister?
Well, each premier has a different relationship with Ottawa, different political stripes. They have been very unified, and that's been impressive over the last while when you've got, Liberals like Dr. Anthony Furey out in Newfoundland and Labrador, British Columbia's NDP government, formerly under John Horgan, now under David Eby, and then you've got a bunch of conservative-minded premiers, be it Danielle Smith or Scott Moe or Doug Ford here in Ontario. But, Danielle Smith can pick on Ottawa and it helps. Francois Legault in Quebec can pick on Ottawa and it helps. It drives up their support back home. In Ontario, you can't do that. Newfoundland, he's a Liberal. He's got to be careful about doing that. Also, they have different needs, as you say. So Newfoundland is the oldest province by age, average age. They've got far more people over the age of 65 in that province than you do in Alberta. Alberta has the youngest population. So that means that you're going to have very different issues when it comes to healthcare. If you've got 20% or almost 20% of your population under the age of 18, which is the case in Alberta, but you've got less than 15% of that in Newfoundland, and you've got a huge seniors population, well, then what you're looking for is going to be different. So that's how a lot of it plays out, and it's why there's not a one-size-fits-all. Having bureaucrats in Tunney's pasture in Ottawa dictate health policy in each province wouldn't work, because you'd be looking at it from what you know locally. And guess what? Ottawa is different than other parts of the country when it comes to age, demographics, health outcomes.
Late last week, the Trudeau government had its second big climb down of the week, Brian. First, it was suspending changes to the medical assistance and dying bill until next year. And then they paused amendments, not canceled, but paused amendments to their own gun bill. Were you shocked by some of these moves?
I was as shocked that they pulled the amendments and said they're withdrawing them, as I was that they put them in the first place, because this was a bill that wasn't about banning hunting rifles and shotguns. It was supposed to be a bill that had broad public support for putting a freeze on the sale of handguns. Some minor changes to gun control laws, but generally speaking, Canadians, poll after poll shows, are fine with putting a freeze on handguns. In fact, probably the majority of Canadians, including the majority of Conservative voters, would vote to ban them if they could. They don't deal with guns, they don't like them. But they know that people hunt. They know that this is a thing we do in this country. And there was a big public backlash, and the Liberals lost the support of the NDP. They lost the support of the Bloc. They never had the support of the Conservatives for this. They lost the support of Indigenous leaders across the country, Carey Price, the NHL great, all of these things. But very importantly, Liberal MPs turning around and saying, do you know what you're doing to us? Marco Mendicino, the public safety minister, doing a cross-country tour at the request of Liberal MPs to show, look, this is the problem. This is why we have to fix it. Strangely, though, they didn't just pull the amendments and say, okay, we made a mistake. They said, yeah, we might bring them back. So they took political heat for bringing them in. They're going to pay a political price with some of their base for withdrawing them. But any benefit they get from withdrawing them, they're hurting themselves by saying, we might bring them back. That's just bad politics all around.
Brian, we've heard the calls for bail reform across the country. The Conservatives had a motion before the House, and it was voted down on Monday night. Didn't the Liberals say they were open to bail reform?
They are. That's the claim anyway. I do have some doubts about that, but there was no way that the motion, which was defeated 205 against to 116 in favor, was going to get the support of the Liberal government. So, and the reason for that is the Conservatives wrote a motion that beat up on the Liberal government and said, it's your fault. It's your policies that are doing this, and you're wrong, and you've got to do it. If they'd worded the motion differently, if they'd put forward it in a very neutral way, maybe they would have gotten support. But as I say, I have my doubts that the Liberals really want to do this. A lot of the problems with bail reform stem from Bill C-75. It was passed in 2019. And it made bail the de facto option, the default option for judges. Told judges and justices of the peace, let people out with the least onerous conditions as quickly as possible. And you talk to, again, like healthcare, you talk to governments across the country, and regardless of political stripe, they all say this has to be fixed. Police chiefs say it has to be fixed. I was talking with one senior municipal police officer in Canada the other day, and he said, these guys run with impunity now because they know there's no consequences. And another police official described it as not a revolving door, but an open door with the way the bail system's going now. So it's got to be fixed. The government's under a lot of pressure, but so far I haven't seen any movement, and just, a lot of talk, no action.
Brian, the Trudeau government has been under fire for a cozy relationship with consulting firm McKinsey over the size of the contracts being awarded and the company's record internationally. What's the controversy here?
The controversy is that McKinsey used to get a small amount of consulting contracts. They're a fairly major firm, but they'd get a couple $1 million over several years. They've been used by all kinds of governments across the country. But under the Trudeau Liberals, it was noticed that they were getting a lot more contracts. Turns out it's about $120 million. It's more than 30, 40 times what they got under the Harper Conservatives. So people started asking questions. They pointed to the cozy relationship between Justin Trudeau and the former managing partner of McKinsey, Dominic Barton, the man who went on to become our ambassador to China. This is a guy who has had a heavy role in forming government policy, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on China. But international media have looked into McKinsey and said that there are real problems with how they operate. They've had trouble in South Africa with allegations of malpractice. They've had issues in the United States where they had to pay a huge fine for their role in advising Purdue Pharma on opioids and how opioids became the epidemic problem that they are, not only in the United States, but everywhere. And McKinsey had a hand in that, holding an executive and client retreat just a short drive from where 1 million Uyghur Muslims in China are put into re-education, basically concentration camps. This is a company that plays on the edges with some, ethical things. Conservative MP Garnet Jennis has been focused on that side of it. There's the huge money side. And while Trudeau says, oh, we don't have a cozy relationship, we're not tight with them, Dominic Barton has been an advisor to Trudeau for years. There are photos of them in, one of Trudeau's famous hugs that my colleague Warren Kinsella wrote about the other day. It's all very telling. It's all a little, does it pass the smell test sort of thing? Government's going to hire consultants, but are we getting the right advice? And is it money just being handed out to friends?
Last week, we heard about a single hotel in Calgary that housed 10 people at a cost of $6.8 million. Now, you said last week it's not the only hotel, but the tip of the iceberg. Brian, can you explain?
Yeah, when I heard about this from Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner and her order paper question that, and this is all official government documents tabled in the House of Commons, and it showed that between April 1st and October 30th of last year, we paid $6.8 million. And then the same document, it shows that in those months from April to October, only 10 people stayed at the hotel. I thought, that's got to be crazy. So I asked Public Health Agency of Canada, how many other hotels, how many cities? They won't give us all of the information. They won't say which hotels they were. They say that's a security and commercial sensitivity issue, that they can't divulge that the way they did to Ms. Rempel-Garner. But they did admit 14 cities across the country, 38 designated quarantine facilities that were hotels, and a total cost of $389 million, wow, including $77 million between April 1st and December 30th, when all of the hotels closed. So the one in Calgary ended at the end of October. Other hotels stayed open until December 30th. And you've got to be sure that there were many months, just like in Calgary, there were many months where there were no guests or 2 guests in a single month. And we block book these hotels, Hal. It's craziness. It's just like what we're doing with the $94 million that we've been able to track so far on what the government's paying for hotels for people coming across at Roxham Road. And again, hotels not always used, but the government's paying for it. Or, correction, you're paying for it.
Yeah, the taxpayers, absolutely. Brian, we've also chatted a bit about the federal government and its spending habits. There are reports now that the Governor General's salary increased by $40,000 over the past few years. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is questioning whether Canadians are actually getting $40K worth of value from Mary Simon, extra value. Brian, how does the government really justify this huge increase which took place during the pandemic?
Well, I can tell you that Canadians are not getting an extra $40,000 worth of value from Mary Simon, and that's not a reflection on her. It's just, is the Governor General's office worth that, to pay that individual to take on the job? No. How are they defending this? Because the Governor General's salary, like many at the top of the federal food chain, are determined by a set process. And that's why you get the annual pay raises of MPs. So April 1st, MPs are going to get another pay raise. This was done many years ago, and I think it was done for the right reason. Is it still being handled in the right way? I'm not sure, because the pay raises are above inflation. It was about 4.5% per year for for the Governor General, because some of those raises happened before Miss Simon. But, Jean Chrétien set this up at a time when MP salaries had not gone up for years, when there were concerns that we were paying our MPs so little that they were open to being blackmailed, that they could end up selling secrets to make ends meet. I mean, at one point, we weren't paying people very much to travel across the country, spend a lot of time away from their families on jobs that literally never end. So he decided, take the politics out of it, set it up on this automatic thing. The Governor General's salary is part of that. But I think maybe it's time to check the formula and say, are we doing it right? You don't want to end up like Ontario. They froze the MPP salaries back in 2008. They haven't had a raise since then. And you've got people who should have retired a long time ago. They won't, because they also don't have pensions. So you got to find a balance. I think the balance is off. And what's happened with the Governor General's salary shows that.
Brian, we only have about a minute left here, but I wanted to chat with you about the record number of people who are crossing into Canada illegally at Roxham Road last year. Now, there's news that American politicians are actually dishing out free bus tickets to get more people there.
Yeah, so this is because people are coming across the southern U.S. border into Texas. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is saying, hey, we'll send you to New York. Here's a free bus. the people are arriving in New York. New York Mayor Eric Adams has National Guardsmen at the Port Authority bus terminal in New York City, along with charities and businesses handing out tickets to Plattsburgh, New York, which is the last stop before you get in a cab that takes you to Roxham Road. A New York Post followed this story the other day. They followed people on the buses up to the cabs, to the border. And yeah, they were being told, hey, I got this ticket from the city of New York. They're going to give me a new life in Canada. The Trudeau government needs to raise this with the Biden administration and tell them it has to stop. I doubt they will.
Wow. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Many would argue that families in the church have been the bedrock of our communities for generations. But, you know, as people mature and attitudes and values and webs sometimes flow, the family unit and churches continue to provide a solid foundation for communities, but sometimes those families struggle within communities. Joining us to chat about it and how the family and church still impact our health of our communities is Pastor Doug Shimoda with City Light Church here in Lethbridge. Pastor Doug, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Now, Pastor Doug, in your opinion, what benefits does the family unit really bring to our community?
You know, you got to look at the Bible, and the Bible says that God actually puts the lonely people into families. That's Psalm 68, verse 6. And the family unit really helps us to experience less loneliness, I believe. When you think about it, life is it's all about relationships, and the family is God's microcosm. Is his ordained way to do life, so our family can help us through the worst of times and the best of times. And I believe it's all about trying to build healthy bonds in a family, and that bonds of love that support and promote, good mental health, emotional health. Yeah, and if you look at all the studies, you'll find that spending time with family is so important because it actually helps reduce anxiety and stress. And right now it's so important that we have face-to-face communication as opposed to digital, and just face-to-face communication really helps to reduce times of anxiety, depression, mental health, and it helps us in so many ways physically as well. We think about families spending more time eating meals. I mean, meals are healthier made at home than bought at a fast food restaurant. We think about family times where we get together, do sports outside, hiking, gardening. All that helps to improve our physical health, our heart, our brain, our hormonal, immunal health. Yeah, you combine all those benefits, mental, physical, emotional benefits of family, and you see why family time is so important for us so that we can live a longer, healthier and a happier life.
You know, it's interesting too, in the Bible, it talks about no man or woman is an island. And like you talk about that, human interaction is so key, it's so vital for healthy relationships. But unfortunately, during the pandemic, many people, family members, were isolated, including our seniors. How detrimental was that? And kids not being able to go to school and hang out with their friends.
Yeah, that's so true. Disconnection, isolation causes a whole bunch of other problems: mental, physical, emotional. We were created to be relational beings, and without people around us to encourage us and to help us, no man is an island to themselves. And so we desperately need to seek different ways, especially through family, but developing good family relationships and time, so that that's what makes us better people all the way around.
Now, Pastor Doug, can you share with us some of the red flags you've witnessed as a pastor that can kind of lead to a breakdown of a family unit?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest red flags would be when people get too busy. It's busyness that causes disconnection. Less face-to-face time is just really not good for people. And it's one of the main causes for loneliness. If you think about social media, excess social media causes people to be less social and less relational than ever. And that's what causes a lot of problems. We get when we get away from face-to-face connections and times, that's a big red flag. It's just being too busy. Other things like financial stress. Financial stress causes problems. It's one of the biggest reasons for marriage breakdown too as well. And so we need to be aware and work on these areas that could cause breakdowns in the family unit.
Now, in your mind, how is the church really well equipped to help families struggling to keep it all together?
You know, I love what Pastor Leon Fontaine, he talked about the culture that he developed in his church is called LAUGH. It's all about love, acceptance, and forgiveness. And I believe that's what we need to develop in our churches, and that's how the church can help people. You know, because people are looking for those three essential things. They're looking to be loved. They're looking to be accepted, forgiven, you know, of all their sins, and that's what God provides within His church. And the church is really an extension of Christ Himself. It's His arms, legs, feet, arms, you know. So yeah, and we truly need to be surrounded by relationships. You know, one of the best analogies about the type of relationships we need in our lives is like a brick. A brick within a wall is surrounded by six other bricks. Three types of relationships. There's 2 bricks above, two beside, 2 below. Well, we need people above us to help lift us up and to encourage us and to mentor us. And we need people beside us to walk with and encourage us. And we also need to be giving of ourselves to help other people in difficult times too as well. So there are all those types of relationships are relationships that we can get through the church to help us to keep it together.
And thank you so much for mentioning Pastor Leon Fontaine. We miss him so dearly, especially around here at Miracle Channel and Bridge City News. Pastor Doug, inflation is still hovering around 6%. The rising cost of living has impacted so many families across the country. What encouragement can you offer people during these very difficult times?
Financial responsibility is a big issue, and today we're seeing so many people credit card debt, so much debt, out of control debt. So as a church, we try to help people. Of course, we do that through our preaching. We have offering giving times, and we encourage people to follow the pathways of God's principles and giving and receiving. Giving doesn't make you have less. It actually allows God to give you more. So it's a principle of reaping and sowing. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. So we try to help. And I think more and more churches are trying to help people with their financial debt and wealth creation. There's a great course that many churches have in their. It's called Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey, and it's offering people a good plan to get rid of debt and to deal with bad spending habits and attitudes and learn how to budget and to save. Because we as a church, we want to help people to prosper mentally, physically, and spiritually and financially too as well.
You know, some people use an acronym for the Bible, which is Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth, BIBLE. Now, can you give us an example of how the truths of the Bible have really helped families through difficult times?
Yeah, one thing that the Bible really helps people with is hope. It offers people hope. And you read the Bible and you keep reading consistently, and you find your faith and your hope just growing as you listen to those words and you try to put them into practice. And there's a scripture in Jeremiah 6, I believe, that talks about the ancient pathways that we're to walk in, and they're really the ancient principles of God from the beginning of time for mankind to walk on. And if we walk these paths, we'll walk into places of blessing and prosperity and protection. And the prophet encourages us to walk in the ancient pathways, walk in these ways, and it will go well with you. And that's the Old Testament. Even in the New Testament, Jesus talked about it's the truth that sets you free. He tells a great parable about 2 types of builders, the wise builders and the foolish builders. And he tells people to build their lives upon his words. He says, he who hears my words and he who puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. So when the rains came down and the streams rose and the flood and the storms blew, that house did not fall. That life did not fall apart because it was built on the truths, the foundation of God's truths and God's words. So that's what we try to do as a church is to help people with just principles and pathways. God's word is a lamp unto our feet, a light for our path.
So, Pastor Doug, where can a family member go in the Bible if they've recently lost a loved one and really need to find comfort from their grief? The Holy Spirit's leading comfort.
Yeah, I believe that one of the best places to go to is start reading the Psalms. The Psalms is all about dealing with your heart and your emotions, and that's one of the best places to read. Psalms like Psalm 23, dealing with darkness and death, and trusting God. And there are so many scriptures throughout the Bible. Like the book of Isaiah is an excellent place too as well. And of course, the Gospel of John, the very words of Jesus. So many comforting words there too as well. So yeah, the Bible is a great book of comfort.
Sadly, I lost my nephew to a drug overdose about 5-6 years ago. My mother passed away a couple of years ago. Many families have lost loved ones. Can you share with us the practical ways a church community really helps members grow in their faith and help them through the grieving process?
Yes, I believe that God ordained church to be a place of healing and of wholeness and building lives and building families. And so we really encourage people to not follow the normal trend of attending church maybe just once a month or once every statutory holiday, but make it a regular part of their life. Being in a worship presence is actually being in a house of God. The local church is being in the presence of God. And that's being in the presence of God's love, God's power, a place of faith too as well. So that really helps people. We also encourage people to go beyond that, not just the Sunday morning, but we're a church of small groups, and many churches believe in, and having small groups, which are actually care groups where people can, build relationships, create authentic relationships, friendships of friends of faith to encourage one another and comfort one another. And it really helps when you're going through difficult times. We believe that we need people who care and love and can pray and connect us with God too as well.
Now, one of the serious issues families are facing right now is emotional stress due to a lot of the current events in society today. Just got out of the pandemic. We're going through all of the high inflation right now. So what are some of the things a believer can provide to friends struggling with stress, panic, and emotional pain, and even depression?
Yes, I think with everything that's happening, we look at social media, and we are so much more aware of all the negative stuff that has happened. So sometimes we've just got to shut down or to just narrow our access to things like social media and media involvement, and even the internet too as well, because we become aware of negative things that are happening all around the world. And Jesus said, when you hear of wars or rumors of wars, he said, don't let your hearts be troubled. He said, and he also says, in this world, you're going to have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. So as believers, we're always trying to point people to Jesus, that he's the one, that if you keep your eyes on Jesus, you're keeping your eyes on someone who could take you through, break you through all the darkness and all the problems. And he really is the answer to all the life's problems.
Do you think sometimes busyness keeps us away from keeping our focus on God too, keeping our eyes on Jesus? Whether it's, busy with our kids, taking them to piano lessons and swimming and hockey, and then being involved in everything, but spending time with the word of the Lord?
Yes, so true. And, it really is a discipline, and at first it doesn't happen easily, but it takes a great effort on the part of a believer in Christ to determine that I'm going to do my devotions today. Often we don't see the value of it at the very moment, but as we keep on continuously, reading the Word of God, it builds up our faith and developing this relationship with God through prayer. And we find out suddenly our awareness of God and his working in our lives becomes much more vibrant and real. So, and that's so important that we do that with each other. But the Bible also encourages each of us to spur one another on to love and good deeds. So that's that thing. We just so need each other. We desperately need friends of faith.
Let's talk about the human heart for just a moment now, Pastor Doug. Do you think that people have the same spiritual need now as they did back when Jesus walked the earth?
Oh, absolutely. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And mankind is still the same. And God created mankind with a hole in their heart that only He can fill by His Spirit. So Jesus says, "Come to me." You got to come to me, and I can fill it. I'm the only one that can satisfy that deepest longings in your heart. I created you to have a personal relationship with you, and all the benefits of that relationship come through this personal relationship with God's Son, Jesus Christ. That's why He sent His Son, because we desperately needed to fill that hole in our heart.
And so many people, they're working overtime, trying to get ahead, trying to climb that corporate ladder. But what is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his own soul, right? When you lose your focus, not spending time with God and your family. Now, are you finding in your capacity as pastor at City Light Church that people in our community are still looking for this rest that Jesus is talking about? Rest and replenish our souls?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter when you live or where you live. That's what we need. We need rest, and people need rest, physical rest, but we need rest in our soul, is right. Rest in our spirit. And that's what Jesus promises. He said, "I give you a peace, and I give you rest that the world cannot give." And we think about it, that peace and rest comes through a person. He's the Prince of Peace. And He tells us in another, like the book of Philippians in the New Testament is a great chapter. The chapter 4 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything with thanksgiving, by prayer and petition, give your prayers and requests to God." And then He says, when you do that, then this peace comes into your heart and mind, a peace that transcends all your heart, all understanding, will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. It's a powerful promise, but it's for us today.
Amen. Pastor Doug Shimoda from City Light Church in Lethbridge, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.